Hey everyone, this is George Soto and you're watching Startups Unedited. Hey everyone, this is George Soto and you're watching Startups Unedited. Today I'm incredibly excited to be joined by Erik Rannala, who is one of the founders and main partners at Mucker Capital down in Los Angeles. I would say, Erik, you are probably the hottest venture fund. I know maybe you don't want to admit that, but I will say it. Hottest venture fund in Los Angeles. You've been just in the game for such a long time, from being the VP of product at TripAdvisor. You were with my buddy Michael Deering over at Harrison Metal as a seed investor. You did, the accolades go on. How are you? How's LA?
Thanks. LA is good. I moved down here about 4 years ago from the Bay Area, and in that time, the ecosystem has, matured and evolved a lot, a ton really. So it's been fantastic, and there's still, a long way to go for LA as an ecosystem, I think. But I think for the long term, it's going to be one of the most interesting startup and tech ecosystems in the world. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was chatting with Matt Mazzio of Chris Sacca's partner over there at Lowercase Capital. I know they're primarily headquartered in the Los Angeles area, and he was just talking about, from the days that he was at CAA to now, like if you're a consumer product or you're anything related to media and entertainment, anything related to publishing, like LA is probably the best place to be. I don't know what your take on is.
Yeah, I think that's right. For consumer, I think LA is a fantastic place to be because it's one of the biggest consumer markets in the world. And then it's also a really diverse consumer base. So it's probably one of the best markets to launch a consumer product. You've got, every socioeconomic group, ethnicity, race, language, it's really an incredibly diverse consumer market. So for launching a consumer product, it's great. And there's also a ton of consumer talent here, not only from the entertainment industry. I think that's what everyone thinks about when they think LA, but that's only about 8% of the GDP of LA. Broadly, LA is just this really big, diverse economy. So we see a lot of consumer stuff, and it's a great place to, start or run a consumer business. But, you've got the aerospace industry with companies like SpaceX and a bunch of drone stuff going on. Tesla's got a huge presence here. Faraday Future, a lot of the electric car industry is here. You've got, the biggest between LA and Long Beach, 40 or 45% of all the stuff that comes ports. So you've got a huge logistics industry. It's just finance. It's a really diverse, big economy, and we see that reflected in the companies that we end up investing in and the founders that we meet. So it's a pretty cool market.
Fantastic. But that's actually a good segue into my next question. I personally have always I have 100% failure rate when I've attempted to launch a B2C business. What are some of the differences? And I know that's, this is a long-winded, not an easy question to ask, but if you think about maybe one or two of the differences, what are some of the differences between go-to-market strategies when dealing with or launching a B2C versus a B2B business?
Yeah, I think it depends on the type of B2C business, but oftentimes there's more immediate and clear transaction that happens, whether it's a SaaS business or a product that you're selling to a B2B customer or an enterprise customer. Oftentimes the monetization comes faster and it's more clear cut. With some types of consumer businesses, it's not always true. Sometimes there is a clear transaction with consumer businesses, whether it's e-commerce or buying a product or something like that. But there's this whole class of consumer products like social media content, sometimes and others where the monetization comes not from kind of an immediate transaction that gets monetized. So and often you need a really large user base for those types of businesses to work. So there's this lag where, it can be harder to bootstrap those businesses because you can't monetize them as immediately, which can make them different or harder. I think with consumer businesses, that don't monetize immediately, you really have to be able to scale up fast and show the momentum, and then raise capital based on that. Versus with some other types of businesses, you can demonstrate the unit economics early on, in a transactional business, and that kind of traction can sometimes be faster than the scale on a consumer business.
Yeah, it's interesting because I personally launched a social network for travel in late 2004. I was trying to build a Facebook clone, and MySpace was still, really hot, but you could see that there were some issues on the horizon, and I just failed miserably. And I just, and one of the reasons why is, frankly, we didn't have the virality or the social graph that we have today that I think a lot of consumer businesses can actually ride on. And if you think about like MySpace, from what I remember, they were able to build like a small ecosystem or small community of followers in the Los Angeles area, kind of leveraging other people's audiences. And I just couldn't actually do that. But when I ended up moving into B2B or the early days of SaaS, I was able to identify like a very specific user type within an organization, reach out to that organization and that user and say, hey, are you having these same pain points? And it was a lot easier for me to actually verify that and then eventually get some commitments. So that's what I really liked about B2B. Do you kind of see the same sorts of stuff with some of the companies that you're investing in?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think with B2B, oftentimes you can start to validate the demand and sort of what customers are willing to pay very, very early on in a different way than you can with consumer. You can start to get a sense for unit economics, cost of acquiring a customer, lifetime value, often much more quickly or earlier in a B2B business than you can in certain types of B2C businesses. Like the one you described around social, and creating a social network, for example. That can be a lot tougher because oftentimes there's no immediate monetization there. So you don't have a sense, or at least a good sense, for the lifetime value of that customer, or how well you might be able to monetize them. So that makes it hard to then think about paid acquisition. So then you're really only relying on different types of free acquisition, and there aren't that many of those. You've got PR, SEO, which takes time to kind of scale up. So it is more limiting.
Got it.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, why don't we talk a little bit about Mucker? What are you guys up to? Any kind of exciting news? And if you're a founder, what are some tips that you would that you should be mindful of when you're trying to attract or partner with a firm like Mucker?
Yeah, so we kind of do two things. We make seed stage investments out of a seed stage venture fund, and those are usually seed rounds anywhere from kind of $1 million to $2+ million. And then we also run what is ostensibly an accelerator program called Mucker Lab, and those are usually pre-seed companies that are raising angel capital or have raised kind of angel rounds. And then we participate alongside those angels, and then they go through our program, which is we work with a really small number of companies per year, probably about 10-ish companies a year in annual cohorts, and we don't do a 3 or 4 month program like most folks do. We have kind of annual cohorts, so a lot of companies will work out of our office for a year plus, and then we work really closely with them. In terms of advice, I think that for us, we look pretty broadly across anything internet or software enabled. So we don't have specific limitations on the types of companies we're interested in. Anything that's kind of internet enabled software service is interesting to us. And I see a lot of companies spend a lot of time early on fundraising, and it ends up being a distraction from actually building the product and validating some of their kind of initial core hypotheses. I mean, if I had sort of one piece of advice at that stage, I'd say focus as much of your time as you can on just, building an initial product, validating some of your, those initial kind of core hypotheses, and less time on fundraising, because, the minimum amount of fundraising that you need, or funding that you need, to do that, just to build that MVP and validate some of those initial hypotheses, is really all the funding you need in the beginning. And I think sometimes people try to go out of the gate and raise, a big seed round before they actually even get started on building or trying to go to market with an MVP. So I'd focus on getting some proof points first before trying to go out and raise a big venture round.
Awesome. Erik, thank you so much. I know you're dialing in from the road, and the Los Angeles roads can be, an interesting place to be calling in from. Really appreciate your time. If folks want to, follow you on social media, what are the best channels? And are you on Twitter? What's your handle?
Yeah, I am on Twitter. It's ERSF. My handle's an artifact from when I still lived in San Francisco.
Nice. Fantastic. Well, have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks. You too.